Hello, everyone. I'm Jean-Claude at Beyond Mystic, and welcome to today's Beyond the Vault series. With me, of course, is the one and only CEO of Miles Franklin Precious Metals. It's none other than Andy Scheckman. You can find him at milesfranklin.com. Andy, welcome back to the show. How are you?
Hey, see, it's great to see you, brother. It's been too long. Thanks for having me back.
Crazy times, man. We're already at assassination attempt number 2, perhaps 3 with the car bombs, and perhaps 4 with the chemical, whatever was happening at the rally the other day. Man, batshit crazy. What do you think?
Yeah, I played at that golf course several times, actually. I know exactly where that was.
Oh, yeah?
It's an interesting golf course and one of the nicest golf courses I've ever played in my life. And you get to the second or the third hole, and there's this pink building. And you hear the craziest noises coming out of this pink building. And what the hell is that? I said to the guy the first time I was brought there. It's called Trump International. It's in West Palm Beach. And it's a prison. There's a prison that is right there on the grounds of the third hole. These poor prisoners have to watch people playing golf all day long. But I know exactly where it is. And it's very surreal to think, hit that close to home. Obviously, I wasn't there or whatnot. But I mean, it's so surreal that we keep seeing stuff like this, and it's an indictment against the system that we've come this far, that we're that divided that we don't even respect things like the office of the presidency. And it's crazy. So a sign of the times, my man, and probably a sign of more to come.
I think so too. And what was interesting, apparently he was lying in wait for at least 24 hours or at least 12 hours before the event. So somebody tipped him off. So there seems to be some type of mold within the organization. It's funny that DeSantis is refusing to hand him over to the feds. So I wonder, have you heard anything about that?
I have not. That would be surprising to me. I wonder what his rationale is. Have you heard?
Yeah. No, I don't know. My guess was that he wants to interview them and maybe offer that information to Trump before he hands them over to the feds, because here we are 2 months over after the July 13, and we still don't really have any news about the July 13 attempt. So maybe that's part of the game. I don't know. It's crazy times. And speaking of crazy times, of course, we have the exploding pagers and cell phones. It feels like a movie, Andy. All this stuff used to be conspiracy theory, and now it's conspiracy fact. Man, where do we go from here? I guess the big news from this week, Andy, of course, is the rate cut from the feds. 50 basis points here. People are suggesting that this could be that pivot moment that we've all been waiting for, at least the beginning of it. Walking the tightrope here, maybe to not create this hyperinflationary event. It's happened before. We're seeing actually right now the Fed... Scott is sending excess liquidity soaring, sparking a next RIC inflation surge. And I saw this also, and I wanted to talk to you about it. For Powell, the first rate cut was always easy. Now comes the much harder part, avoiding the 1970 rebound in inflation, which eventually led to, of course, us getting off the gold standard. And here we are today in that same boat. Andy, what do you make of this first Fed rate cut? And is it perhaps that kind of first domino here into that pivot mode that a lot of people had been forecasting here for quite some time, Andy?
Yeah, I mean, and it's done when stocks are trading around all-time highs, where our deficit is at all-time highs, where our debt is in the stratosphere. We're creating $1 trillion of debt every 3 months, or 100,000 of debt every second. 1, 2, 3. I mean, that you can't make that up. At the same time, we have this fugazi macroeconomic data like the CPI and the jobs report. The CPI is a bunch of nonsense. It's a complete and total lie. And the jobs report, we've seen nearly 1 million jobs. It was 818,000, but they changed throughout the year last year, at least 200,000. They all of the talk of the strong economy and this and that, it's all a bunch of nonsense. And we revise 1 million jobs downward. And at the same time, you got the American consumer tapped.
Yeah,
that they have the lowest level of savings, the highest level of debt ever, and they talk about the great replacement job shock. It's what is it? What is the job situation look like? 1.3 million American workers lost full-time paying jobs over the last year, replaced by 635,000 part-time jobs, most of which were immigrants who are here illegally. It's a bad situation, and it's going to get a whole lot worse.
When we saw, I wanted to bring this one up too. I thought it was interesting. The last two times the Fed cut rates by 50 basis points, and one was January 3rd, 2021, and we had some difficulty, to say the least, here in the S&P. It happened again on September 18, 2007. The S&P fell again by 54% here. And just before COVID, also we were seeing that same kind of issues in the market. Are you expecting now, like we've been talking about this for the last couple of months, we're seeing the rich guys like kind of sell their stocks. We're seeing the Berkshire Hathaways of the world get into cash positions. You and I talked about Greg Manorino and what his forecast was here, perhaps for October. Are you expecting a downturn? And is this what kicks it into high gear? Or do we still have a little bit of wiggle room here? Is the Fed playing out a trial balloon, or already more, is it more risky for everybody else here moving forward at this point?
This is exactly, you can see those gray lines represent recessions. And every single time that first of all, the yield curve has uninverted since 1950, every single time, the minute you uninvert where we are right now, it ushers in a recession. And this is 100% predictable since 1950. And the same thing is true of an economist, I think her name is Claudia Sahm, S-A-H-M, where she basically said, if you take the 3-month rolling average of unemployment, and if it goes above from its low point, if it goes above that by over 50 basis points, you're in a recession. And it is predicted with 100% success rate the last 9 times this has happened. And so both of those have been triggered. So yes, by every metric, it appears, and then the fugazi numbers coming out of the BLS as it pertains to unemployment, they're just completely and totally worthless. Yeah, I would say we are entering a period of time where, you know, the unemployment line meets the printing press. This is stagflation, and God forbid it gets much worse. It's the most painful of all. Little or no economic growth characterized by higher prices, higher taxation, higher inflation. And what is it that we see Kamala wanting to do? Raise taxes, raise the capital gains rate, put a 25% tax, unrealized gain tax on the wealthy, to jack up capital gains taxes, all of these things. And that, what does that do? Well, that makes people like billionaire investor John Paulson come out and say that if she wins, he'll withdraw $9 billion in assets from the market and go into gold and cash, because he's the exact person that would be affected by this. And people say, well, what the hell do I care about a billionaire named John Paulson? Well, because John Paulson has $9 billion in the market. And guys like John are wealthy enough to pick up tent and leave and say goodbye and go sit on their ship in the middle of the Caribbean, take with it their jobs, their tax base, revenue that is created, all of this stuff, and it will crater the markets. So yeah, this is just more of the same. Is it too stupid to be stupid? Or are we heading down a path that was engineered to create a reset? It certainly seems that way when you look at the stupidity of the moves that are being made. And again, you talk about the lying CPI statistics. We're 60+% away from their target rate of 2% inflation. I never understood why they said 2% to me. Why not -2%? As I often say, the lower the rate of inflation, the higher the standard of living. But they're not even near that 2%. They're literally, it's peaking up again. We're almost at 3.5%. So if you believe those numbers, which are a lie, we're 60% away from their target when the stock market is at or near all-time highs, when the real estate market is still above its 2006 peak, when all of these assets are at super stupid highs, which are a byproduct of suppression of interest rates. And so price discovery has been distorted. So I got an idea. Let's lower rates again. That's what we should do. And what it will really do is reignite the inflation engine. And that chart that you showed is very interesting, that how it is perfectly following the pattern. But the difference is in 1980, we had not that one, the other one where it showed it was tracking the previous market where it reignited inflation. And the difference is back then we had a surplus. We weren't 35 trillion in debt and 200 trillion in unfunded liabilities and a massive trade imbalance that we have right now. We were able to weather that. It was painful, but you add into it right now a recessionary environment, a stagflationary environment where people don't have enough wherewithal to meet their obligations. you'll see things like residential real estate start to collapse because, look, a 3 or a 4% 30-year fixed mortgage is great until you lose your job. And then what happens? And then you start igniting inflation. When you talk about inflation, this is a situation where the wealthy people don't care about inflation. Their asset prices have gone sky high. But for the people who are, struggling to put food on the table, they're the ones that are going to be affected by this the most. And a lot of these people are going to vote for Kamala, and they don't realize that's probably the absolute worst thing that you could possibly do, at least in terms of what it means to the dollar, what it means to inflation, what it means to the economy, and what it means to the big investors who will say, I'm out. Between November and January, if she wins, you are looking at the greatest market collapse in the history of this country, because no one's going to sit around and wait for those policies to be enacted or those laws to be passed, whereby they're going to start to, literally eviscerate any of the gains that and even for people making over $1 million a year, you're going to now pay a 44% capital gains tax. Everyone will sell. It's the craziest thing ever. Did they lose you, Jason?
Sorry about that. Yeah, my dog was barking. Going back to the inflation, a new inflation report shows that prices are up 20% under Kamala Harris. Of course, we're being lied to about the inflation. But what's even more troubling, I saw this article earlier on Zohedge yesterday, I believe it was, grocery rationing within 4 years. Here, the person posting this article is saying that Harris's call for price controls, you and I have talked about this, how they always lead to disaster, on groceries and rents, is the most stunning and frightening policy proposal made in my lifetime. So again, we're looking at some weird dislocations, not just of the market and market prices, but also possibly of the distribution chain of our goods or everyday goods. Where do you sit on all of that right now, too? Because you and I have talked about this with Bill Holter before, where everything revolves around credit. And when all of this freezes up here, and presumably when the big players are removed from the table, we're going to see that credit freeze. Suddenly, the farmer can't get their products to the store and then to your plate, right? So how close are we to that disastrous event, and what can people do to kind of...
Well, I mean, first of all, it shows a complete lack of understanding of what inflation is. Inflation is 100% of the time a monetary event. It is an increase in the money supply. So when you blame the greedy grocery store owners who are making on average under 2%, you're barking up the wrong tree. When you're saying this to the people who own the small businesses and the corporations who have worked their ass off to get to where they are by doing things the right way, and now claiming that they're greedy. It's not the greedy grocery store owners or shop owners. It's the greedy government who is printing so much money that we are adding $1 trillion of debt every 3 months, which took 200 years to do the first time. Inflation is an increase in the money supply. Even the way that they calculate inflation, the consumer price index, we are supposed to believe that rising prices is inflation. No, rising prices is a symptom of money creation, a symptom of more money chasing lesser goods and services. Therefore, prices go higher. It is not the shop owner or the grocery store owner that is to blame for this. In fact, it just goes to show how stupid Kamala is, or how much they are gaslighting the public. And the worst thing that you can do is enact price controls. That happened last time that happened. Farmers were killing baby chickens because it cost too much money to raise the chicken all the way up to full grown to bring it to the slaughterhouse to turn it into chicken breast so that you can eat it. So they would kill them. They would drown them. This is the same thing that's happened over and over and over and over again. You cannot do that. It would create empty grocery store shelves just like that. And it just goes to show how dumb the public is to believe that inflation is rising prices, that is controlled by the shop owner rather than the government, who is making money so plentiful.
You just called it. It's gaslighting. It's the perfect redirect, right? It's the corporate greed. But let me just bring this in for Canadian subscribers. Hold on a second. Corporate greed. I'm sorry about that, but no, it's official. Trudeau has now literally doubled down on debt. When he started in office, we were at $16 billion, and today, it's a few years later, we're at $1.3 trillion. So that's not corporate greed. That's government overreach and overspending. Andy, keep going.
Well, it's core, and the reason that the elite don't bitch about this, it's called the Cantillon effect. And the Cantillon effect says the people closest to the money spigot, they are benefited disproportionately, because if you're a hedge fund and you can borrow money at next to nothing and buy assets in this inflationary environment, your assets go higher. So you're becoming wealthier and wealthier and wealthier and wealthier. You don't care about the rising cost of food and fuel and whatnot. You don't care because you're so rich. By the time the money, which can take a year or 2 or 3, funnels down into the system, the average person is struggling just to make ends meet. And that's exactly where we are right now. And doubling down on it only increases the probability of it being a very disastrous plan, and blaming the wrong people. You should blame Trudeau. We should blame the Fed. We should blame Janet Yellen. We should blame the Treasury and the Fed here in the United States for brain dead monetary policy and wholly irresponsible fiscal policy. And it is the creation of money in the irresponsible spending habits of the Fed that of the Treasury that has created this problem. Certainly not the grocery store owners, that's for sure. I do business with one of the largest grocery store chains in the United States, and I'm very close friends with, I guess you could say she doesn't own it anymore, but she's a family member of company that started it, the family that started it, and she's horrified by hearing these things. These people work so hard and make so little compared to other businesses like Wall Street businesses. The level of profit that these corporations make is next to nothing, and to be vilified is just really horrible and barking up the wrong tree. We should be thankful for companies like grocery store chains who make it. When my in-laws moved from Russia, like 1973 or 4, they said the one thing that they were most amazed by above anything else was the grocery stores. Walking into grocery stores and seeing 27 kinds of cereal on the shelf, which we take for granted, right? You come from a socialized country like they did, the former Soviet Union, and you're like, my goodness, was socialism the wrong choice? So these are things that just, again, it just goes to show how naive and undereducated the masses are to go down this road without raising a massive fuss.
Yeah. Speaking of another road to go down here, I was watching this what's his name? Martin Armstrong's interview, and he said the deep state knows that it can't cheat to win here with Kamala. They can't put her in. If you're looking at the rallies right now, Trump has 70,000, 80,000 rallies. She can barely fill in a math gym or a school gym at your local school. And he's talking about here the rhetoric of war. We've seen that over the last couple of weeks. We've seen the Biden administration suggest that they would approve long-range missiles being fired deep into Russia. Russia has responded to that, saying, hey, that's going to be an act of war. So there seems to be that rhetoric, and it looks like gold might be sniffing that out. So on top of seeing all the crazy monetary policies you're just talking about now, we have to add the component of war here, and why perhaps there's so much pressure on gold and also silver to some extent. But let's get into the gold right now. We're sitting at all-time high. Perhaps it was sniffing out again this 50% basis points, which could be what people were talking about being that main pivot point to losing confidence or the remaining confidence in the markets, and people trying to get their money out of harm's way. Is that what's happening right now with gold? Is it like an indication of the war front? Is there something else? What do you see? Or is it also what you've been talking about for a number of months now, this introduction at some point here to the BRICS unit that is 40% backed by gold and 60% backed by BRICS currencies? All of that in the melting pot. Andy, what do you say?
Yeah, I think that's what's been driving it. Look, let's just take for a moment at face value that the numbers that the BLS spews out are right. And that we really do have a positive real yield between inflation and what you can get on a short-term duration treasury, 5% on a treasury versus 3% inflation. We'll take that at face value. And a strong dollar. That would be the death knell for gold. With a strong dollar, a positive real yield, and you look at the outflows out of the ETFs, which would speak to the fact that the American public has largely not participated in this massive run on the price of gold, yet it continues to march higher. In fact, I read an article that just basically said, well, not only that companies like Newmont Mining actually showed an increase in mine supply this year, not a decrease. We have an increase in mine supply. You have a positive real yield. You have outflows out of the ETFs. You have a strong dollar, and yet gold keeps on going higher. What it is that the people in this country are asleep, and the central banks and the rest of the world are looking at gold for what it is, and it is wealth. And that's the most important thing to understand. They view it as wealth. And you can see that by the amount of outflows coming out of the exchanges. Massive deliveries are coming off the the exchanges, off of COMEX and off the LBMA. And so, yeah, it has very little to do with anything but the biggest money in the world who know the playbook buying and taking possession at any sign of weakness. I don't think we've seen anything yet.
What do you make of all this secret buying? And the last time you were on the episode, you talked about how some of the bigger corporations now are going directly to the mines to buy doré products. So we don't really see that reflected on the COMEX and the LBMA. Here, what's the story behind the Saudis secretly buying here 160 tons?
It's a huge deal.
Yeah.
It's just like China coming out and saying we stopped buying gold for a couple of months. No, you didn't. Look at the customs data out of London. The bullion banks are the ones that have to they're the ones that record it and report it. And if it's bought by a government entity, it's supposed to be reported to the IMF. In this case, the Saudi Arabian Monetary Authority is the government, and so it was reported. They didn't make a big deal about it. Tried to do it discreetly without any public announcement. They're playing both sides. And this is exactly to the point that they look at this as massive importance to de-dollarize and to accumulate gold. And I'm going to play it out this way so you can really understand what I'm saying. There's a guy named John Little from the Pickaxe. I give him great respect. He's a hell of a researcher, and he wrote something, and I kind of adjusted it to fit. But think of it this way, right? So, okay, on one hand, you could take dollars if you're Saudi Arabia. And we know that they didn't re-up the exclusivity deal, right? We everyone knows that. Yeah. And they've been taking other currencies and other things like gold to a little degree, not to a large degree, but they said, look, we're not going to just take dollars exclusively. So with gold at $25.90 right now and oil at $70 a barrel, 1 ounce of gold buys 37 barrels of oil. And so you could look at it from their standpoint. Do we want to take gold, which is going up by 9.9% annually for the last 25 years without the counterparty risk that the dollar has, or take the dollar instead, and then put our excess into treasuries, which can be frozen, which inflation is eroding their value, which inflation again is going to erode the value of the dollar. And with all things being equal, even at 3%, if we believe that, even though John Williams, I just saw an interview, he said add 8 to that. You got 11% inflation, so the dollar's losing value, can be weaponized against you, or you can take gold. And so he made an analogy that I thought was really interesting. He said, a woman's purse that could hold 20 pounds would be 290 ounces of gold. 290 ounces of gold buys you 10,730 barrels of oil. Now, if you're the Saudis, what the hell do you want? Do you want dollars that are being inflated away and can be weaponized, or do you want gold which continues to go up in value year over year over year over year without the counterparty risk? And so what they are doing is they are setting the stage, if you will, for a new system that gold is going to replace the dollar in many respects, at least in terms of this new settlement currency, for things like commodities, which the world doesn't want inflated dollars from a bankrupt country that is going around the world imposing sanctions, viewed as hypocritical. So yes, it's a massive deal. And I think the fact that they're trying to hide it only makes it that much more relevant. All the same way.
Volumes. Yeah.
I'm sorry?
It speaks volumes.
Yeah. And to see gold at $2,600 an ounce is crazy. I mean, it's crazy. And yet in my life, JC, I never would have thought, that we'd see gold at $2,600 an ounce, that with little to no fanfare by the media. I mean, at all. And so the public is asleep at the switch as the biggest money in the world is pushing the price of gold higher and higher and higher. And we haven't even begun to see anything yet, as far as I'm concerned. Nothing.
I was talking about this with Marty Hibbs the other day. I had him on for the Beyond the Charts, and we were looking at the dollar index, and he was showing me how there's a lot of negative pressure here moving forward on his chart. So to your point here, other countries are asking themselves, should I take this dying dollar for my product, or should I take gold, which is going up? I think the equation is pretty easy. But further than that, we were kind of like having a fun conversation, like, yeah, but we're just before the election. They're reducing rates to make the appearance of everything being okay, but for some reason, gold's not budging. And typically, when they want to make the picture a little bit rosier, we always see a downslide effect on gold and on silver. And so far, that is not happening. To the contrary, we're still seeing pressure here to the upside. Do you think that this is part of the transformation, so to speak. He was talking about this eventual great taking. You and I talked about that this is coming up, that it is set up. Is it set up for now or in 6 months or a year from now? Nobody really knows. But the setup eventually is going there, and we're going towards a new financial system regardless of it. What do you make of that? The fact that right now we're heading into the election, and as you say, the gold is kind of like an outlier saying, hey, we have a problem here. Things are not okay. Yet they're doing everything they can to brainwash us on mainstream news. What's going on?
Yeah, 100%. I mean, because the West is a system that now is based upon nothing other than confidence, and it's losing confidence. The world's losing confidence in this country, not only because of the mismanagement of the dollar, not only because of the weaponization of it or the stupidity that we've exhibited around the globe, but maybe more so our own stupidity here at home. And so much of the world is losing confidence in a system that once inspired confidence, once inspired people taking chances to come to this country, giving up everything to come here and have an opportunity to chase the American dream, which is becoming further and further and further away, and even unobtainable for a lot of people. So yeah, I think when you realize that, look, we can force people in this country for now to take dollars. We mandate it, but we can't make the foreigners take dollars, and that's the most important thing. And I think we'll have a hard time trading with other countries if nobody wants to accept U.S. dollars, especially from a rapidly inflating, unbacked liability of a bankrupt government. And that's where we are right now. So yeah, I think this is a lot deeper than what used to be. Traditional forms of thinking must be reevaluated. Unconventional times call for unconventional thought. And by lowering interest rates, it should be a favor to gold anyway, because you're making the opportunity cost of receiving interest on a non-interest bearing asset, the higher rates go, make it harder and harder and harder to want to hold gold that isn't producing any return. And that's a fallacy too. I mean, we can see that it's doubled the performance of the 10-year treasury over the last 25 years. But yeah, to your point, this is a system based on confidence that has really been eroded and is eroding by the day in really an exponential fashion.
So yeah, we have that confidence eroding, but at the same time, we're getting more and more demand. Let's look at silver now. We kind of alluded to this in the last show, but this was big news here too. India silver imports to double on demand for solar investment. So we're getting fundamentals on top of that, driving demand upwards here. Why is this a big deal here moving forward, and what's happening in the silver market?
Oh, they bought 45 million ounces of silver in August. That's about as much silver as on the COMEX in the registered category. That's 1 month. Just 1 month, and that's massive. They've purchased between 700 and 800 million ounces of silver over the last 3 years, and so they are basically using the suppression of the Western paper market to drain the exchanges. This is what I've been trying to say to people for so long. These are numbers that are accelerating now. They're going from doing it in a manner that doesn't catch much attention to a manner that's now being reported on Reuters. This is very different. And when you see that kind of silver being drained out of the exchanges, it should wake people up very quickly. And I've been mentioning how, to your point, last time we talked about how my interview with Sean Kunkun, the CEO of Dolly Varden, we talked about silver is being drained from all the miners by China buying the doré and the concentrate, so it doesn't come off of an exchange, paying double what the West will, in a way that really masks the amount of silver they're buying. But they're the second largest producer of silver in the world. What the hell do they need to do that for? Because it's not an industrial metal, it's a strategic metal. Right. And he who has the commodities makes the rules. So to see India doing this, and they've been the largest purchaser of it on top of China, yeah, this is the greatest value I've ever seen in my career. And I want to say one other thing, and I could be very premature. I am the little boy who cries wolf, no question. But if you look at the last Commitment of Traders report that just came out, that's the report that's published by the COMEX. It shows really 3 groups of traders. You have the commercial banks on one end, you have the hedge funds on the other end, and somewhere in the middle is something called the others. These would be sovereign wealth funds that are kind of independent. But the bottom line here is that normally when one end sells, the other end buys. If the hedge funds sell, the commercial banks buy. If the commercial banks sell, the hedge funds buy. Well, what we saw in this last report was the commercial banks bought, and they bought by covering shorts that they needed to buy to cover. But the metal didn't come from the hedge funds. The hedge funds didn't cough it up. It was the producers, the miners who did it. which is one step away from chaos. Because if the hedge funds don't cough up the silver and the commercial banks are massively short and need to cover in rising prices and they can't get it, this is how bang, the whole thing blows apart. To see them go to the producers, I've never seen that before, ever. And it's almost as if they are realizing that this game is almost over, that you can only manipulate a market over an extended period of time by pushing it in the direction it's going. And now, when you have countries like China and India hell-bent on accumulating this stuff, and they don't care what it costs because they are a sovereign government with the ability to match bankrolls with the biggest Western financial institutions on the planet. Good. Knock it down some more. We'll stand for delivery, or let it go higher, even better. The point of it is that when you look at the LBMA as an example, where they're trading, in essence, 3 billion ounces of silver per day, 3.5 times annual global mine supply with only 300 million ounces there to deliver if need be, those are 90% of those contracts are paper. And now you have governments that are saying, screw it, we'll stand for delivery. Thank you, in massive quantities. So these banks are now, I think, running quietly. They're trying to get out. And maybe they sacrifice one at the altar like Bank of America. But I think they're trying to get out.
Yeah.
Things could get very, very interesting very, very quickly because no one knows what the real price is of silver when you have 3.5 times global mine supply annually traded every day in London, and the contracts on COMEX being almost 2,000% rehypothecated, meaning if 20 people hold a contract of 5 1,000 ounce bars and everyone stands for delivery, if they're lucky, 1 out of the 20 gets settled in metal, the rest get cash settled. It's a default. You put those two exchanges together, COMEX and LBMA, you have the biggest fugazi marketplace of all time. It's Bernie Madoff on steroids. And Bernie ran a great shop till everyone said we need to cash in. Thank you. And when you see all these countries doing that, the commercial banks are screwed. And I think they realize that. And I think it's starting to move in that direction. Only time will tell. But yeah, interesting times for sure.
The Ponzi works well until it doesn't.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, exactly. A little bit by little bit, and all of a sudden. Let me just ask you. I want to get into the crypto space here in just a moment, but I want to go back to this article about India and a lot of these news about solar demand, solar demand. Is that code word for we're panicking and we want a strategic metal, but they don't want to admit that? Because on one hand, we're seeing more and more solar, but at the same time, we're seeing a lot of I guess degradation in the narrative and people who are actually wanting to use these technologies. And on the other hand, we have the Trump that's promising the release of new technologies with respect to energy. So maybe solar is not the real thing and it's just a cover story. What's your thought on that, just quickly?
Yeah, I think it's bullshit. Sorry for using profanity, but I think it's the cover for it. It's the same way that, I mean, look, to me, it's the military industrial complex, going back to John Little again, who shows that there's tremendous amounts of silver needed in every form of high-tech weaponry that we continue to, through the military industrial complex, fund wars all around the globe. And the need to hold silver to make these high-tech aerospace and missiles and submarines and all of this stuff that needs it's not industrial, it's strategic. And that's why I don't know how many banks and mining companies up in Canada that have petitioned Ottawa to reclassify it
strategic metal,
not as industrial, but strategic. And you bet your ass it's strategic. So it's, again, gaslighting. Yeah, we're going to say it's all about solar. And indeed, Modi has embarked upon this solar project to give solar energy to, millions of people. Okay, fine. You need silver for solar, but that's not the reason to stockpile it the way that they are. They know that it's needed in so many capacities. And if you don't have it, you're screwed.
That's what.
And so I think they use solar as a cover to, again, throw people off the scent. Misdirection is very pervasive, and to think it's not is a mistake. In any game you've ever played where there's an opponent, there's some form of misdirection. The fake, the head fake, yes, but that's what it is. That's what any game is with an opponent, right? And setting things up to misdirect your opponent. Well, the same thing is true here. If India's intention, along in coordination with the BRICS, is to accumulate all the metal, then the last thing they want to do is say it. So they'll let the West continue to suppress the price. And like Saudi Arabia, they'll take it under the table. Like China, no, we're not buying at these months. Yeah, right. They are under the table. And again, the import-export numbers betrayed their lie, but at the same time, there are ways around that. Like I said, if a commercial bank or a sovereign wealth fund buys, independently, even though it's on behalf of the PBOC or a government, from entities that aren't going to report it to the IMF, or if the gold and silver they buy isn't pure, like the Dore, it's not reported to the IMF. So no one really knows how much these countries are buying, and it's a bunch of nonsense. Even when they admit to it, yeah, it's for solar. Trust us, that's all we want it for. Bullshit. And so that's what I think people need to understand is that, this is a lot deeper. This is a once in a generation crossing of a Rubicon where power is shifting. And in order for that power to shift, you have to have a stocked war chest. And that isn't going to be with dollar bills and US treasuries. It's going to be with base metals, soft commodities like wheat and corn and soybean. It's going to be the BRICS grain exchange, where the head of the BRICS grain exchange says, we produce more wheat than the West does, but we don't control the price. It's controlled on COMEX. And when this grain exchange hits, that will change. Well, do you think they don't understand that about all of the world's commodities that have been traded for 140 years on the LBMA or since 1974 on the COMEX, and they all feel screwed by it? And they know we can't really it doesn't benefit any of us to get into a war with missiles, but here's how we beat them. Let them be stupid enough to continue to suppress the price, and let's stand for delivery and watch what happens in the end. And that's the little by little by little by little, then bang, the Operation Sandman, the night of the switch, where they switch and they say, we're done. And maybe that's in October, where Dilma Rousseff, the head of the BRICS New Development Bank, the former president of Brazil, has said, we have agreed in principle to a new settlement currency backed by gold. Well, how far away are we from finding out if that's real or not? 6 weeks? I guess it'll be interesting to see what happens over the next month and a half as we head then towards the election. Absolutely. Where things are going to get really nuts. And I think that's why you see this acceleration by these banks while they still can.
Yeah. Talking about the switch or crossing the Rubicon, I thought this was interesting. A week and a half ago, Trump was announcing that he was going to make an announcement this last Monday about, and he used words like leaving the slow banks behind. In any other circumstance, that would be an act of war, considering that the bankers run the world, right? And so this was a little bit kind of odd. He did do this 40-minute talk on X, but he didn't really get into the details everybody was looking for. So it suggests that it was kind of like a shot across the bow type of thing, or kind of a trial balloon here. But nevertheless, it appears that we're moving towards, and he's signaling here that we're moving towards perhaps a disintermediated system where we have a new world of multipolar world currencies moving forward. And you've just explained some of the examples happening in the East, but it looks like it's happening here now also in the West. What did you make of this announcement? And I know it's kind of nebulous on Monday, but where do you think he's leading up to this? He had talked about last month the idea of a strategic Bitcoin reserve and some type of attachment towards gold. Clearly, he's setting up something here for a new world financial order, so to speak. Where do you think this all leads, Andy?
Well, it makes me feel like he understands the whole game, that he indeed wants a reset. That's kind of the way I feel. Even his running mate Vance said having the world reserve currency might not be such a good idea after all. I think he understands we've created too much debt. We don't have the ability to pay it off. A trillion seconds ago is 31,688 years ago, and we are accumulating debt at the rate of 100,000 per second. You can't do that. We have 200 trillion in debt when you add in the unfunded liabilities of Medicare and Medicaid and Social Security. Medicaid Part B is 99 trillion in the whole as is. Part D, 22 trillion, 77 trillion in Social Security. The numbers are too big. You have to reset the system. And it will be a digital system. And the government side of things would be Project Agora, which is their answer to Mbridge, or the G7's answer to it. It's a cross-border payment system. I haven't read that article in its entirety, but simply to say that we are heading to a system that will be digital. We are heading to a system that will be, the question really becomes, in my opinion, is how does decentralization factor into this equation? Right. Because the way that it is right now, it is, even with Mbridge or with Agora, it is not decentralized to that extent. It has a central authority, permission-based system. So look, the fact that he understands it, talking about Bitcoin, and you mentioned gold, it was Cynthia Loomis, the senator from Wyoming, said we should revalue the gold that the United States has and use the proceeds partially to buy the Bitcoin for the Bitcoin strategic account. Any way you look at it, he knows. In fact, I think he will reset the system if he gets in. I think that's what he realizes must be done. He's a businessman. He understands numbers. He gets it. And what you were saying earlier about maybe he being the fall guy, and looking at the information that came out of what's his name's computer,
Martin Armstrong.
Martin, yeah, and he's a smart dude.
Yeah.
I have felt that lately too, and I felt that lately that they're going to let him win and try and make him the fall guy, because you're even seeing, you know, the stupid CNNs of the world. I saw one last night, and you know, I was watching Fox last night before I went to bed. I got home real late from a flight, couldn't fall asleep, and I'm watching it 1 a.m. and they were showing a clip on CNN where, you know, these reporters were, you know, going throughout middle America and diners and whatnot and interviewing people. And we couldn't find anyone that didn't want Trump. Everyone wants Trump. It's like they're kind of acquiescing.
They couldn't find anybody who wanted Kamala, is what
right.
they were saying. Yeah.
Right. And they're surprised by it. They're acquiescing to the reality. And you're even seeing people push back against the narrative on CNN, saying that, you know, all of this stuff is crap and it's not true. And they're kind of pushing back. And I think that is probably, you know, more likely that they realize that they can't vote Trump out in the respect that, or vote Kamala in, because they see the numbers are too big, disparaging. And when she's allowed to actually speak, she sounds like a moron. Like last night, she said, the children of the community are the children of the community. Well, what the F does that mean?
Because the community has children, and therefore the children are of the community.
I mean, what the hell, man? And so I think they realize this. Yeah. And if there really is conspiracy around all of this, that's exactly what they would do. Let him come in and let him be the fall guy for letting the whole system break apart. I don't know, man. Like I said, interesting times for sure. And maybe this is why you see all the central banks dumping dollars in treasuries and buying gold. They want to get the hell out of the way of it. And I think that's the best advice I can give anyone, is to get the hell out of the way of what's coming. Because, you know, like you were saying, how everything keeps happening and the phones exploding, and the acceleration of these things everywhere you look. If that's not a signal, if that doesn't tell you that we're getting close to something. In finance, typically when you see greater volatility, it portrays a blow off one way or the other. Well, the same thing is true, I think, of human emotion and human nature. This volatility we see everywhere is going to precede some event, something. I don't know what that is, but I will tell you that I would not, I think not being a contrarian right now is a really big mistake. And don't listen to the noise. Don't listen to the people who tell you that you're an idiot for doing the things that you're doing or feeling the way that you are, because these are once in a generation shifts from what has been to what will be. Yeah. And better to get the hell out of the way and sit on the sidelines in real money than to be dragged down by a Project Sandman, Operation Sandman, or be dragged down by some event that radically on a Sunday night, Monday morning changes the landscape.
Yeah, I agree with you. For those who are looking at getting gold and silver in your own position, you have some cool new products here. Andy, talk about these 1 ounce gold rand elephants and the 1 ounce PAMP Swiss rounds. Also,
yeah. So I'm gonna start in the middle for a moment first. Junk silver to me is the best value in silver. Period. It just is. It really is. Dimes, quarters, half dollars, kind of showing how scarce things are beginning to get. The dimes are gone. I can't find them to save my life.
Yeah,
gone. Quarters and half dollars are available. The 1 10th ounce gold eagle, remember we were showing that a week or so ago, last time we were on as a special, they're gone. The U.S. Mint has run out of 10th ounce eagles. In terms of silver eagles, we've done huge orders lately in silver eagles, and now we're already into mid-October in terms of allocations when they're coming in. What's it going to take for the U.S. Mint to say we're out? And then all of a sudden there are no more silver eagles left for the rest of the year. And so we're beginning to see things get tight. The 1 ounce rand elephant is as cheap as you will ever buy a 1 ounce gold coin for by a major mint. This is the Rand Mint in South Africa that makes the Kruger Rand. Yeah. So that elephant is a kind of a special coin that they're making. And at 59 over spot, that's as cheap as it's been my whole career.
For sure.
Yeah. And then what's kind of interesting about the PAMP Swiss 1 ounce rounds, I've never seen those before, ever. In fact, PAMP Swiss, to me, when I think of PAMP Swiss, I think of 1 ounce gold bars, I think of kilo and 100 ounce silver bars. And thanks to Costco, you cannot find hardly at all 1 ounce gold PAMP Swiss bars anymore. And they're the most respected name in refining. Costco's buying them out, and they only allow 3 per purchase, you know, but yet there is enough latent demand out there that no one wants to talk about, where all of a sudden dealers like myself who have no problem sending PAMP Swiss a wire for $20 million to get as much gold as they'll send me can't even find it. The distributor says, yeah, I love you, Andy, but Costco kind of cleaned us out again. So we are entering a period of time where we're beginning to see things start to tighten up again. These are very cool. I've never seen them before. It's the highest quality silver round I've ever seen. Because Pam Swiss is the highest quality refiner in the industry.
Sure. Yeah.
Anyways, these are
Can
cool.
we talk about the junk silver? Where you're at? I think this was my old poster. Are
we still have those, and it would be that price or better. And we do have that. And to me, it's the best value in the marketplace, period. Sadly, we're not able to send that up to Canada because it's not 999 pure. And Canada has a VAT tax of, I believe, 13% on any gold or silver that is not pure imported into the country.
I spoke to Rob the other day too at mfbullion.ca. They have some cool specials also for the Canadians. Let me bring that up on the stage. I believe they still have the 10-ounce bars there on special.
One of the best guys I've ever met in 35 years of business is Rob.
I asked him also because we had a couple of emails, people asking for the Canadian junk silver. So he was looking around. He said he
can't find it.
They're pretty much cleaned out also last week when I talked to him. But do check it out, guys. You never know. Leave him a message here on mfbullion.ca. If you're still looking for that junk, he might be able to find some for you. But in the meantime, of course, the 10-ounce silver bars there are on sale also. Andy, before we go here today, I'm contemplating doing this conference, Beyond Mystic conference in Ottawa in March. If I was going to ask you, if I do that, would you come? Wouldn't that be cool?
Me, dude? I could think of nothing I would rather do than spend a couple of days hanging out with you and all your friends and all these people here. And you can count me in and book my reservation yesterday. I'm in. You wouldn't have to here, twist my arm, please. Okay. I'm in.
The theme of the conference is consciousness and finance, a woo beginning. So you being there would be really, really cool. A lot of people are asking also, because I know a lot of Americans are interested in coming to the conference. Would you be able to, like if you did a keynote speech, can you do also like a setup of a booth to talk about IRAs and stuff like that for people?
Sure. Yeah. And we can and I could do breakout. I can do whatever. Yes. And the answer is absolutely yes. And I would think of nothing more that I would rather do. I will say the only IRAs we can't do at this point is our Canadian IRAs. And for whatever reason, it's very difficult. I've talked with Rob about that a million times. But yeah, for Americans, absolutely. I would make myself completely and totally accessible and something I love to do. I do 2 shows a year. I do Rick Rules here in Boca in my backyard, and I go up to your neck of the woods to Jay Martin's Vancouver Resource Investment Conference, which I love every January up in Vancouver. I would love to make yours third on the list, and you can count me in, and anything I can do to take part, I'm in.
Okay. I'll have Sarah send you the invitations once we get all this stuff.
And give my best to Sarah, please.
All right. Thanks. Thank you so much, everyone, for joining us here today. Love you guys. Please leave a comment below and stay tuned for the 3 o'clock Beyond the News edition here on Rumble. Jenny and I will be there with you with a special guest and also a special announcement. So you don't want to miss that. Thanks, Andy. I love you, man. Have a great day.
You too, brother. And you too, Jake. You all stay well. Look forward to seeing you next week, JC, and you stay well.
All right. Take care, man.
Bye, guys.
Bye. Bye.